Alright, we're doing something a little different. I, uh, I am a huge fan of board games. I have a decent sized collection, in real life, and one of the games I own is Lord of the Rings, the card game. And this is what we're looking at right in front of us. This is a cooperative, uh, fantasy adventure game. You team up with some friends, and you guys build your decks individually out of a pool of cards, and you basically team up and fight against the game itself. And the game, basically, the enemies, it works itself, and it's just your job to defeat it as a group. Um, I also like this game because it's a good solo game. The game scales from anywhere from 2 to 4 players. Um, it is it's pretty good at all levels, but what I like about it is that I can just play 2 decks, and it's actually a really good solo game. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. So this video is going to be really like a quick and dirty introduction to the game, for those of you that haven't played it. If you know how to play it, and you just want to see me start playing, then just skip to the next video. But for those of you that do not know the game, basically the what you're looking at here is that I'm playing 2 different decks, and I'm going to be switching between 2 different screens. So like this is my hand of cards for this player. Each player controls 3 heroes, and so like for example, we'll just say player 1 is controlling Aragorn, Eowyn, and Theodred, and those are his heroes, and this is his card of hand. And then the other player, we'll say player 2, is controlling Legolas, Gimli, and Barivor, and this is his card of hands. So to play the game, I mean, the objective of the game is, one is to not die. All of your heroes have a health value indicated. You can see in the middle of the card. I can't really point to it because it disappears. But basically right here, this big red number in the center of the card, that's their health value. And if all 3 of your heroes die, you lose. The other way to lose is if your threat exceeds 50, it gets to 50. So your threat is the combination of the individual threat of each one of your heroes. So like player 1, for example, if you look at the very topmost number, it's the number in blue. For Aragorn, it's 12. For Eowyn, it's 9, and for Theodred, it's 8. And you add all 3 of those together, and that's your starting threat. And you can see that being tracked down here above my hand. This little red eye symbol. Next to it is the number 30. If that ever gets to 50, then this player is eliminated, and the other player. This player is player 1 has 29 threat, and then player 2 starts with 30 threat. And there's other heroes that you can pick from, like you pick and choose, and they all have special abilities and different threat values. Generally, the more threat they have, the stronger of a character it is. But obviously, starting with more threat, it puts you closer to 50, and you're more likely to die sooner than everybody else. But you'll have more powerful characters. So that's all deck building. As for the game, how to win, basically there is this right here is going to be the quest deck, and I'm playing through the very first quest of the core set of the game. The very first quest is called Passage Through Mirkwood, and there's multiple parts to this quest. So I'm looking at the first card, which is Flies and Spiders, and this is going to tell me how to set up the game and what I need to do. So here it says you would add a Forest Spider and an Old Forest Road card and put them in the staging area. Now the game's already done this. We got a Forest Spider and we got the Old Forest Road. And this box right here is the staging area, and is basically what the enemy deck is like is throwing at you, and what you need to deal with. So this will be filling up and disappearing as we conquer them and move on. So after we do the setup, then we'll flip this card over. Well, we'll do next quest stage. Okay, that didn't work. Let's see. see something here. There it is. So can I flip this card? Flip card. There we go. Alright. It's supposed to do that automatically, but something is not right with the game. Anyway, so if I flip this over, this is going to be like the first part of the quest. And basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to accumulate quest counters. I'm trying to accumulate 8 quest counters. If you look on the left, the very left side of this card, you see the number 8. That is how many quest counters I need to put on this card to move on. And that's the whole purpose of the game. Everything this game is going to be doing against me is going to be trying to prohibit me from moving forward in this quest. So once I get 8 counters on it, then I'll add the new card. This will be completed. And then I'll take this, and then I'll move. This is the second part. And then it's going to tell me what to do here. It says, the path forward forks behind you. Okay, so it's just saying to do this. So the next part of this quest would be, okay, this time I only need to put 2 counters on it. And then it's going to say, how do you, once I put 2 quest counters on it, then this goes away, and so on and so forth. And in this particular quest, there are 3 cards that I have to complete. Once I complete this last third quest, this will tell me, the last thing I need to do is find and defeat Ungoliant spawn to win the game. And once I kill that Ungoliant spawn, then I beat this quest. So that's how, that's basically how questing works. So that's my objective, is to accumulate quests on these cards. Now, to deal with how this game is going to progress is at the beginning of our turns. I'll take one turn, and then he'll take one turn, and then we'll move on. So, for example, if I'm playing player 1 right now, this is his hand. So his hand's got a lot of things. There's different cards. There's got, you got your allies, and then you got events, and then you got attachments. And you can see what kind of card it is at the bottom, the very bottom of the card. It says ally, and this one says event. Allies you play in front of you, they stay on the board, they fight for you. Events are like spells or things that alter the game state immediately. And attachments they attach to other cards and make them stronger or whatever. So at the beginning of our turn, what you do is you get 1 resource for each one of your heroes. So you'll see me do this. I'll highlight them all, and I'll add a resource token. So each one of these heroes now has a resource. Now, to play cards on my turn, I have to pay their cost, and the cost is the very top left number, and in this case, this Longbeard Orc Slayer is a 4. I have to pay 4 resources to play this guy, I'm only generating 3 resources per turn, because I generate 1 per hero, so I can't cast this guy on the first turn. I can't play him, but these other cards I can play. So this is an ally. He's a cheap ally. So to play him, I would just I would remove. What is the remove? It would be F4. So I would just click this. Remove this and this. And then I got rid of 2 resources to play this ally. And he goes in front of me. And now he's on the board, and I've recruited him to my cause, basically. And then from there, after I play my things, I'll go to the next player, player 2. And he would also add 3 resources, and he's got he's got a lot of options. He's got a lot of allies. He's got some equipment he could put on one of his heroes, but just to keep it simple, we'll just say he's gonna play a 3-cost ally. He's gonna play this horseback archer. It costs 3. It's a pretty good fighter, so we're gonna get it out there. Bam. Okay, so we've done that. Now, after we've played our cards from our hand, let me go back to player 1. The next thing you do is we do the quest phase. Okay, and this is the part of the game where I try to accumulate tokens onto these quest cards, which, remember, is the whole point. It's how I win the game. So I'm trying to get 8 counters on this card. So at this phase, the quest phase, I'm going to try to do that. So to do that, if you look at all my heroes, this is my heroes and my allies. They got different stats, right? So let's look at Aragorn again. So Aragorn, he's starting from the very top of his card. He's got his threat value, which we've already talked about. It's 12. That has no effect throughout the rest of the game. It's just for setup. And then down from that, you got that little sun symbol, and that is his willpower. And then you got his axe, the axe symbol, which is 3. That's his attack power. And then his shield, which is his defense. And then below that, that big red number is his health. So it's self-explanatory. The axes and the shield is for fighting. When you want to fight, that's what you're going to use to fight. Now the willpower, the first number, is what you're going to use when you're trying to quest, to get farther and in the game and to attempt to beat it. So to do that, I have to turn my characters. I have to exhaust them, and exhausting them is basically turning them sideways like that. So all of us are going to determine how many characters we want to exhaust, and we're going to do this kind of collectively. We're going to say, like, if I was playing with another person, we would kind of talk about it and discuss what our plans were, and we would go through it. But for this purposes, I'm going to say, okay, I want to quest with. You can see that Eowyn, she is extremely good at questing, and she's not such a great fighter. So obviously, her purpose is to quest. So we want to definitely have her questing, and then. So he's got a questing of 2. I want to do that. And we're also going to quest him. And then player 2 is going to quest... Not Barivor or Gimli. Well, we only got one guy to fight, so... Let's quest Gimli. I don't think we're gonna... Well, you know what? Let's leave Gimli up. I don't think we're gonna quest... So 1, 2, 3, 1. Yeah, we're fine with this. So actually, the second player is not going to quest at all. The reason for this is because the big decision is like, okay, well, why don't you just quest with everything if that's how you beat the game? So anytime your guys are exhausted, they can't fight or defend later on in the round, because after we try to quest, then we're going to move into combat, and you can't use your characters if they've quested. So basically, on your turn, each character can only do one of 3 things. They can either quest, they can attack, or they can defend. So if I send all my characters to quest, then none of them can attack or defend. And if I want them to all attack or defend, then I'm not going to accumulate any quest tokens. So it's all about a balance. That's a big decision. It's deciding who is going to actually quest for the turn. So this is what I'm going to do. So now, once everybody has decided who they're going to quest with, you add the total numbers of all the questing up, of all the willpower is what it's called. So Theodred has 1, Eowyn has 4, Aragorn has 2. So that's 7 questing power. And then what you do is you compare that against the cards in the staging area in this box. Basically everything that we're up against. And the numbers, if you look at an enemy card, the numbers are very similar. The top number is the threat. Is it the threat? No, the threat. So instead of willpower, so where my characters have the willpower symbol, the enemy characters have the threat symbol, and the threat symbol is what I compare my willpower to. So what I do is I go through all the cards, and you can see, even though this is an enemy and this Old Forest Road is not an enemy, it still has a threat. So I have to go through all the cards in the staging area and add all their threat together. So this is 2, this is 1, that's 3 against my 7. So my goal is to have a higher number of willpower than the enemy has in threat. So I obviously beat it 7 to 3. So my total is now 4. You subtract the difference, and I have 4 total quest power that I'm going to be adding to this card. 4 total willpower, I guess. So I'm gonna so what I would do is, okay, I successfully quested, and then I would just add 4 progress tokens. That's what they're called. They're called progress tokens. 4 progress tokens to that. So already I'm halfway at completing this quest. Now, if I had failed, so if I do not have more willpower than they have threat, then I have to increase my threat, which is my, remember, if I hit 50 threat, that I automatically that player loses. So let's say, for example, that I'd only quested with Theodred, right? He's got 1 willpower, and they got 3. So then I would take the difference, and I would have to add it to each player's threat. So I lost by 2, so I would have to go here and increase my threat by 2 for player 1 and for player 2. So now we're at 32 and 31, and we're that much closer to 50. And if we get to 50, that player loses. So it's very important that when you quest, that you have to have enough that you make sure you at least equal the amount of threat that's on the board. Now, I skipped a step. That's how you compare it. But so let's go back to what I had. So I have 7, right? Now after I've chosen, you don't immediately compare it. I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. So you add your totals up between all the players. I have 7. I compare it. I don't compare it. Next thing I do is I draw an encounter card for each player that's playing the game. So, for example, we got 2 players, so I'm going to reveal 2 encounter cards one at a time, and these are going to get added to the staging area right now. And after I draw these 2 cards, then I compare the total. So this is where it adds a little bit of unknown, because yeah, I have 7 and they have 3, but I'm about to draw 2 cards, which could add more cards to the staging area, and that's going to increase their total. So they might not have 3, they might have a lot more. So it's important that when you're deciding who you're going to quest, that you think about what could be put in here, because there's probably going to be more threat than what's shown. So you always want to have more whenever possible. So for example, let's just do it. So I'll say I reveal 1 encounter card. I reveal the Forest Gate. So that goes in the staging area, and it is 2 threat. Okay, so now I reveal another one, and I reveal a King Spider. See what I mean? So already now we compare the totals. So they got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So in this case, we actually do not add any progress tokens to the quest, just like that, because this is what happened. This is what was put in front of us. So we should have probably committed maybe 1 or 2 more, but we'll be fine. So that's the questing phase. The next phase is the travel phase. So you notice that we got monsters, enemies, and then we got locations, and these are forest gates and old forest roads. So these locations, the enemies are pretty obvious. We're gonna have to fight these if we want to take as many cards out of the staging area as possible on our turn, because when we defeat these cards, they are no longer in the staging area, which means they don't add their threat against our willpower. So the less cards that are in here, the easier it is for us to add counters to our quest. So we have to get these cards out of here. So the one way to do it is, for enemies, you obviously have to kill them, which we'll get to next. But first is a travel phase, and these locations are still threatening us, and they're taking up space in our staging area. They're making it harder for us to proceed. So we want to travel to these places and get them out of our way. And to do this, in the travel phase, we pick one location in the staging area that we want to travel to. So here we got the old forest road and the forest gate. So if I'm looking at the threat, I'd want to take. Just looking at the threat, I'd want to take the forest gate, and I'd want to travel there because it's going to get rid of 2 threat if I travel to it. The old forest road is only going to get rid of 1. However, these cards also have effects. So the old forest road tells me that after I travel to it, the first player may choose and ready 1 character he controls. So if I travel here, yeah, I'm only getting rid of one threat off of the staging area, but I can ready one of my characters, which will open them up to attack or defend this turn. So that's something I could do. The forest gate, this one says after I travel to it, the first player may draw 2 cards. So in this case, it's pretty clear choice that I want to travel to the forest gate, because I'm going to get rid of 2 threat and I'm going to be able to draw 2 cards. So we definitely want to do that. So I would travel to here. I move it to the active location. And the active location is it's impeding our progress on the quest. So This, you'll notice the forest gate also has a red number in the middle of the card, just like the quest does. This one has 8. The location has 4. So what this means is that we can't add any more counters to the quest card unless first we have to add 4 progress tokens on the forest gate, and this will get rid of the forest gate, completely discard it, and then we can start adding counters to the quest again. It does slow us down, but it's better than having it out here where it's impeding our progress anyway. At least this way we can deal with it and then get it out of the way and move on. So we would have traveled there. So the next thing is is the combat phase. So this is where we get to I'm sorry, it's not the combat phase, it's the encounter phase. So the encounter phase is where we basically decide who's going to fight who. Let's see. Okay, so these enemies, we're not engaged with them right now. These are enemies that are in front of us, but we haven't actually engaged them. They are just they're threatening us, but we don't have to deal with them yet. But however, we want to deal with them. We want to get them out of here. So this is the time when we get to do that. So before we fight them, we have to actually encounter them. And to do that, basically each player has the option of taking one of the cards from the staging area and adding it, and basically encountering it and adding it to him, like to his in front of him, basically. So, for example, I could say, the first player could say, okay, I want to fight this forest spider, and he would take it all out of the staging area and move it in front of him. Let me move these back a little bit. So now he's engaged the spider, and the spider is now, he has to deal with the spider in the combat phase. And then the second player could say, okay, well then I'll just go ahead and take the king spider. Now, that's your option. You don't have to do this. And a lot of times you don't want to do this. You don't just want to take every enemy because, the enemies are pretty strong, and you want to make sure that you have, you're capable of actually defeating them. So, if nobody decides to take anything, or if there's any enemies left in the staging area after we decide to do this, when we decide, say, okay, we've taken our one choice at an enemy. If whether we do that or we don't, it doesn't matter. If there's any enemies left, we compare their engagement cost to our threat. So our threat, like for example, player one's threat, this guy, is 31, right? So any enemies that are 31 threat or lower are going to engage this player by themselves. And our second player has 32 threat. So what this means is we look at these enemies, and the engagement cost is at the very top of the card, which is 25. So this enemy is going to come after us, and this is a king spider, which is a threat of 20, and he is going to come after us as well. And how the game would decide who gets it is it would take the first player, and the first player would take the highest engagement cost enemy. So it would be this forest spider at 25, that would normally engage him. So that is below his threat, and he would encounter that person. And then the second player would do the same. So second player there's only one enemy left, but it's got 20 threat, which is lower than his threat, so he has to take it. So he takes it. And that would be how it is. Now, if there were more enemies in the staging area that have lower engagement costs than our threat, so if there was more 20s and 25s in here, it would just keep going back and forth. So it would say, okay, now player one, another enemy is going to come to you, and then another enemy is going to come to you, and you keep doing this until there's no more enemies in the staging area that have a lower engagement cost than you have threat. And so basically what that means is when you're looking at before the engagement checks, where you have the option, when you have the option to select one by yourself, you don't have to wait for the game to sort them out by itself. You can choose one enemy to engage. So you have to look at the game and say, okay, well, how's the game going to dish these out to us? So I know that the game is going to say that I get that you get this guy and then I get this guy. And then we look at this and we say, okay, is this what we want to do? Or do we want to do an optional check and just say, you know what, no, I want to fight the stronger guy or whatever, or whatever. And then you say, okay, well, instead, I'm going to choose to take this guy and you can choose to take this guy. And then that will, and so you can kind of decide, you can kind of manipulate who has to encounter what to some extent. It's a little complicated at first, but when you see me play it, it'll make more sense. So after that, let's just say the game sorted out. So he got this guy, and then he got this guy. So now we go on to the combat. Now, the first thing that we do is during the combat phase, we deal a shadow card to every enemy. So starting from the first player, deal top cards, highest engagement. Okay, yeah. So we deal a shadow card to each player like this. Okay. Now this shadow card is basically a hidden threat that we're not aware of. It's another unknown that could bite us if we're not smart about how we play this. So the first player would go first, and he would resolve all the attacks of all his enemies first. And then the second player resolves the attacks of all his enemies, and then after that, the first player attacks with all his cards, and the second player attacks with all his cards. So all the enemies attack first, and all the players attack back. So the first player resolves the attacks of his, so he chooses which ones to do first. So he says, okay, I'm going to let the spider attack now. Now the spider is now attacking. Now the first player has to choose somebody to defend with. Basically, he's only got one character that's unexhausted right now because he spent these 3 on the quest. So now these guys can't fight right now. They're out of this. So he only has this guy. So what he can do is he's going to say, okay, well, I could not defend with anybody. Now what that means is that if you don't defend with anybody, that this spider's attack, which is 2, is going to do its full damage to one of the heroes of that player's choice. So if I say, all right, just undefended attack, I would say, all right, I'm just going to take the 2 damage to, let's say, Theodred. And then I would just add damage tokens to him. Now, the problem with this, let me go back to his character. So the problem with this is that it's you ignore your shield values, because remember I said you have a defense, which this guy has a defense of 1, but that's only comes into effect when you're actually defending. So here I'm just because I'm not defending and I'm just letting the attack get resolved, I take the full damage and ignores all armor. And the other problem with that is that a lot of these cards, these shadow cards that I was telling you about, when he attacks, I have to reveal this after I choose a defender. So if I say, or I don't choose a defender. So if I say, okay, I'm not going to defend, then it's like, okay, well, let's see what this thing's going to do. So then we'd flip it up, like so. Flip. And we'd look at the card. Now, this is great for us. This card, the only thing we're looking for when we flip these cards over is if it has a shadow effect. And you can tell because at the very bottom of the card, it'll say shadow, and then it'll tell you what it does. This card doesn't have any shadow effect. I'm trying to see, is there any cards that do have a shadow effect? No. Okay, so this spider, for example, if this was the card that was dealt underneath of him, this says defending player must choose and exhaust 1 character he controls, 2 characters instead if this attack is undefended. So you can see, whenever you choose to do an undefended attack, a lot of times the shadow cards make the effect worse because it went undefended. So instead of exhausting 1 character, now I would have to exhaust 2. Now that's not a big deal here because we're already exhausted for the most part, but some effects say, do more damage if it's undefended. So this theoretically could have killed him. If this was a shadow card that said add 2 more damage, he would have just been dead and there was nothing I could do about it. So in general, you don't want to let the attacks go undefended. It's very risky to do that. So what I would do is I would instead say, okay, I want to defend with this guy, Guard of the Citadel. So I would exhaust him, and he's got a defense of 0. So if he had any defense, because I'm actually defending now, if he had some defense, you would subtract it from the spider's attack, and then any extra damage would be dealt to his health. So if I had 1 defense, the spider's got 2 attack, I would block one of it, and then I would take 1 damage and have 1 health left. But because this guy doesn't have any defense, he just takes 2 damage and he dies, and he would just be discarded, out of play, and gone. But that's better sometimes than letting it go undefended and possibly losing a hero. So that's something you have to think about. So that would be that attack. And then this is fine. This, and then the next player would go and he would say, okay, the spider, I'm gonna block with, let's see, 3 attack. Alright, so the spider attacks. I'm gonna block with Gimli. Okay, so Gimli's got 2 defense, the spider's got 3 attacks. So I'll take 1 damage as long as this shadow card doesn't say anything bad. So now I flip it. Okay, no shadow card. Alright, good. So now I would take 1 damage. So I would say, okay, I take 1 damage for Gimli. Okay, because 3 minus 2 is 1 left. So he's got 1 damage out of 5 total health. So he's fine. And now we move on to the attack phase. So we go back to player 1. It's his turn to attack. Now he doesn't have any more unexhausted characters to actually attack with. So this is kind of, he can't do anything. So now it goes to the player 2. And he is going to attack with, he can do some things here. So if he's looking at killing the spider's got 1 defense and 3 health. So he needs to do 4 damage. When you attack, you can combine the attack of multiple characters into one. So, for example, I could say I'm going to attack this spider, and I'm going to use this horseback archer who has 2 attack, and I'm going to use Legolas, which has 3 attack. So that's 5 attack between them, and the spider requires 4 damage total to kill, 3 for its health and 1 for its shield. So then this would kill the spider, and he would die, and he would not go back. He'd be out of our hair. No issues. So, but the other alternative I have here is that this if you look at Legolas, he's got a piece of text that says ranged, and ranged means that I can actually attack enemies that are engaged with my teammates. Normally you can't do this. I can't say, all right, I'm going to use Gimli's tap from defending, but normally I can't attack. Like I couldn't have Barivor attack the spider over here. They're not engaged with him. But Legolas has range, and so does this horseback archer, where I could actually attack this forest spider. This forest spider requires 5 health to defeat. So I could do that too. And because they're both ranged, I could combine their attacks and have them both hit the forest spider, and that would kill the forest spider. And that's probably what I'm going to do, because the forest spider is more threatening to this guy because he doesn't have as many fighting characters as this guy does. This guy is better equipped to fight enemies. So that's probably what I would do. I would discard this card. Say take control. Where is it? Okay, and then we just discard it. Bam. And now it's gone. And then at the end of combat, we discard all the shadow cards. Oops, I wasn't supposed to discard the goddamn spider. There it is. The shadow card gets discarded. And this enemy is going to stay here now. He doesn't go away. I now have to deal with him next turn, in addition to any other enemies that come out. So I could be fighting 2, 3, 4 enemies on my turn. So you want to try to take them out as quickly as possible. And after combat, that's the end of the turn, basically. So now we go to basically at the end of that, after combat, basically we say, okay, we untap everything, and we increase our threat by 1. Everybody does. So I would increase my threat by 1. The first player would increase his threat by 1. This is just automatic. Basically, every turn you increase your threat by 1. So if you dilly-dally around too much, you're gonna, the threat's gonna keep going up and things are gonna get worse. And then untap all the cards. We increased our threat by 1, and then the next player becomes the first player, so he'll go first on the next turn. And then basically you start over. So we would, I would draw a card on my turn. I would draw a card. All my characters would get 1 more resource. So now I have 4 because I saved 1 from the previous time. I have an extra card, and now I could possibly play, this Longbeard Orc Slayer, who's a pretty good fighter. Or I could play, this guy, and then maybe save up for an event or something. So that's that. And then we would just go through it again. We'd try to quest. More cards would come out, and you keep going. So little details that I for the most part, when I did all this, I skipped pretty much all the text on these cards, because all these cards have text that alters the game or adds some special effects somewhere. So for example, when I quested last turn with these three guys, you can see Aragorn says, after Aragorn commits to a quest, spend one resource from his resource pool to ready him. So what that means is whenever he commits to a quest, is that I can spend this a resource from him, which is this, and actually untap him. So Aragorn is good, and he's got such a high threat. He's got 12 threat because he's a good character. He's able to quest and attack or defend in the same turn. Theodred here, after he commits to a quest, choose a hero committed to that quest and add one resource to that hero's pool. So these two combo with each other, because whenever these two commit, basically Theodred will add a resource to Aragorn's pool, and then Aragorn spends that resource to untap himself so he can fight later on. So, like I said, and when she quests, I can discard cards to increase her willpower. And I can even do this after the cards are revealed to kind of compensate for some of the unknown. So, you'll see me do that a lot. Whenever Legolas kills somebody, he automatically places 2 tokens on the location or the quest card. So Gimli does more damage for every damage token on him. So right now, instead of doing 2 damage, he's doing 3 damage. Beravor, I can exhaust her to draw 2 cards for 1 player. So this is there's a lot of interesting synergies and things that go on. Also, the last thing I want to cover is the game itself comes with, they're called 4 spheres, like a sphere. And the sphere is basically there's 4 types of cards, and they're like I don't know what to call it, not like a guild or a group of cards and a type of card. So if you look at these cards in my hand, or my heroes, let's just look at my heroes. So you see in the bottom left of these cards, this is the sphere that it belongs to. So there's 4 spheres in the game. There's leadership, spirit, tactics, and lore. Leadership is kind of like it's a very balanced sphere. It's got a lot of cards that focus on all kinds of things, questing, fighting. It's really balanced. Spirit is really good at questing, reducing threat, like drawing cards, not drawing cards, but really good at questing and control. They're really good at control too. Tactics is, so spirit is this symbol, this snowflake looking symbol. Leadership is this symbol, the bottom left, this Y looking thing. Tactics is this sword symbol, and tactics are really good. They're the fighters. All their cards are heavily, they have a lot of warriors, they have a lot of cards that deal with fighting. They're your front lines. And then lore, which is this book, they're all about traps and drawing cards. They draw a lot of cards. They do a lot of healing, and that's kind of their thing. So the game itself comes with a deck, one deck for each of these spheres. So if you were to get this game or play this game out of the box, you would have one deck for lore, one deck for tactics, one deck for spirit, and one deck for leadership. I think it's all 4 of them. But you have the option to customize these decks, and one of the things you can do is mix and match heroes. So instead of having 3 heroes, like playing the tactics deck and having 3 tactics heroes, you can mix and match heroes. And which is what I have done. I have my deck is 2 tactics heroes, and a lore hero, and then my other deck is 2 leadership heroes and a spirit hero. Now the problem with this is that when you want to spend a card, like if you look at all these cards on the right, they all have a symbol, a sphere that they belong to. So I have three spirit cards here. I have a leadership card. So I have 4 spirit cards and 2 leadership cards. Now I can only play these cards when I have by using the resource from a hero that belongs to that sphere. So for example, this card is a spirit card and it costs 3. So I have to spend 3 resources from a spirit hero to play this card. Now, I'm only generating only because my this deck only has one spirit hero in it. It's only generating one spirit resource per turn, which means for me to play this, I have to wait 3 turns. And you saw like all the stuff that happened in 1 turn. So in 3 turns, um, I'll finally have enough resources to spend it all 3 from my one spirit hero and play this card. Where alternatively, my leadership, I have 2 heroes. So they're generating 2 resources per turn, and I can spend, if I want to play this guy, the Longbeard Orc Slayer, he costs 4. I could spend 2 from this guy, 2 from this guy, or 3 from this guy, and 1 from. It doesn't matter. So, if all 3 of your heroes are from the same sphere, it's really easy to cast all your cards and cast more of them because it doesn't really matter. You just, as long as you have the correct number of resources, you just play them. But when you mix and match like this, you have to be. There's going to be a lot of situations where I'm going to have a bunch of spirit cards like this, and for me to play all these, it's going to take forever. I mean, if it's going to take me 4 turns to play this guy, 3 turns, 1. I mean, you're talking 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 turns before I can play all 4 of these cards because I'm only generating 1 resource per turn. So, just something to keep in mind that it's a trade-off. It's worth it because you have more cards available to you. Like, I'm not just stuck with just playing leadership cards. I can play really powerful leadership cards, and I can play the really powerful spirit cards. But it might be a little tough on me. It's a trade-off. So you'll see that come up throughout the play session. I think that about pretty much covers it. Yeah, it pretty much covers it. The rest you'll see in the game. I'll be playing it, and it should be pretty clear. So I'll see you at the beginning of the game.